Okay, so UN Resolution 1441 stipulates that Iraq may not have any weapons of mass destruction. The administration made several claims about this. First, there was the claim about the bioweapons labs. They claimed that there were mobile labs that were moving around biological weapons in Iraq. That was tied to the claim about anthrax. Judith Miller wrote in the New York Times about the mobile weapons labs, and then CNN, with Wolf Blitzer, a former APAC employee, posted a cartoon picture of what these labs probably looked like. They didn't have any real pictures because this was fictitious from the start. Colin Powell, then from a speech from Louis Libby, starts reading about the anthrax. Colin Powell goes to the UN to make a speech about anthrax. Anthrax was connected to this mobile labs mythology. He held up a vial of anthrax and talked about how deadly it would be and alluded that it came from Iraq. Around this same time, Dick Cheney, Robert Kagan, and William Safire had already started peddling the lie that lead hijacker Mohammed Atta from the attack of 9/11 met with Iraqi officials in Prague. It never happened, but by connecting Al-Qaeda to Iraq, and then Al-Qaeda to the anthrax, and then the anthrax to the mobile labs in Iraq, we had 9/11 in Iraq all in one package. Next, they claimed that chemical weapons were being hidden under the palaces of Saddam because he wouldn't allow inspectors in there. This also came from Judith Miller of the New York Times, the girlfriend of Louis Libby, who wrote the speech about the anthrax that Colin Powell read to the UN. It was a complete myth. And last, there was the nuclear scare tactic. Cheney, Rice, and Bush all repeated the line, "We can't let the smoking gun be a mushroom cloud." Onto this lie, there was also from Judith Miller of the New York Times again, this propaganda about aluminum tubes being used for centrifuges. And of course there was the Niger forgeries, or Niger forgeries. This was a document from Niger that purported that Saddam Hussein was trying to acquire yellow cake uranium from that country. However, there were a multitude of problems wrong with these documents. They had a forged signature from an obsolete foreign minister. They had the wrong military seal. They made reference to obsolete factions within the government that no longer existed. It was a complete forgery. And yet, George Bush did it in his State of the Union address and another speech in Ohio. He included the myth of the yellow cake from Niger. We have the myth of the chemical weapons under the palaces. We have the myth of the bioweapons labs and mobile labs. And we have the mythology of the anthrax. Anthrax is a story in itself, but actually the AIM strains of anthrax came from our own government, came from Fort Detrick, Maryland, from a Zionist. We'll go back over that later. Of course, next we had the Atta myth, when he was in two places at once, and that connected to anthrax because next we have the myth of the Kurds. They said that, oh, Saddam is torturing and raping the Kurds and gassed all these Kurds. Actually, Saddam did gas Kurds with the chemical gases we gave him through Donald Rumsfeld in the early 90s and 80s. Here's a clip from 83. Oh, look, there's the bastard, and there's the other bastard, Donald Rumsfeld, shaking hands, posing for the cameras, taking pictures, talking about chemical weapons. Oh, there's another familiar bastard right there. They claimed that we were going to Iraq to spread democracy, yet we wouldn't allow the Sunnis to even vote. Got rid of the Baathists, got rid of the Sunnis, only could vote between pre-selected candidates. Wolfowitz and Pearl said it would be a cakewalk. Wolfowitz said that the invasion of Iraq would be paid for with the sale of the oil in Iraq. That was one of the largest economic blunders ever, and this guy gets to be appointed head of the World Bank. They thought it would be a short war, and yet we're still there. Now they've pedaled back. To avoid disaster, we can't withdraw, we can't cut and run. If we left, things would be worse. And the last thing they say is we have to win, and we're winning. And winning, of course, is not defined. What do you do to win? Nothing. Just stay there, continue to waste money, and allow these crooks to profiteer. Here are some of the players. For the bioweapons labs, that came from a speech by Colin Powell, written by Libby, then rewritten by Powell and George Tenet together. Libby, of course, is part of PNAC and a lawyer for the Mossad. Also in PNAC was Robert Kagan. He also wrote down the myths about mobile weapons labs. And then, of course, their mole Zionist journalist, Judith Miller, probably had a love affair with Libby, considering she went to jail for him and sent love letters back and forth. She worked for the New York Times, and they used that as a source for Fox and the rest of the Alphabet Soup networks. B, the Al-Qaeda in Prague myth came from, again, Robert Kagan of PNAC. Judith Miller, she's always in there. She's of the New York Times. John Rumsfeld, the former head of the Defense Department, and everyone at CNN. They were the first ones to do that. C, the nuclear weapons. That came from everybody, from Bush, from Rice, from Cheney. Bush put it in his State of the Union address. Condoleezza Rice talked over it with Tim Russert, who was also involved in the Libya affair with Valerie Plame. Cheney went on every MSM channel he could. And again, Miller with the New York Times. And she added the tubes mythology to that as well. Now, the Niger forgeries are a special case because it's concrete proof that it wasn't misconceptions or mistakes, miscalculations, or anything like that. It was conscious lies. The Niger forgeries, and we know from Italian papers and so forth, came from Michael Ledeen of Iran-Contra fame with his good old buddy Ghorbanifar and Larry Franklin. Larry Franklin worked for Douglas Feith in the Pentagon, and of course he was the spy, one of the spies for AIPAC, which ties in with the American Turkish Council and Brewster Jennings and Associates with the whole Blaine Wilson Niger thing as well. Go back over that later. Feith, of course, wrote the plan for Bremer. He worked in the Office of Special Plans. That was the de-Baathification of Iraq. It's been an absolute disaster. Now, Joe Wilson, the husband of Valerie Plame, made the claim that, hey, these documents from Niger are fake. There's no way that they got yellow cake uranium, and I know that. His wife, Valerie Plame, was in the CIA, worked in the Non-Proliferation Unit for nuclear weapons in the CIA. Brewster Jennings and Association was her front company, and it was the front company of all the agents on her team. So, Louis Libby ousted Valerie Plame along with Robert Novak and Karl Rove, who also leaked to the press. Wilson was discredited. Brewster Jennings and Associate was destroyed, and their ability to attract nuclear weapons proliferation, which was leading right back to the ATC and AIPAC, was destroyed. We find out later from Sibel Edmonds that AIPAC, as well as the ATC, because many of the same individuals, have been stealing nuclear secrets from the United States, from our own Defense Department and State Department, with Grossman and Haster.